Hey guys, I'm Leah Jackson from G4TV.com, and with two huge esports events happening this weekend, both EVO and MLG Anaheim, I wanted to get together with some of the prestigious members of the esports community and just talk about what's going on in the scene right now. So today, I'm so happy to have with me JP McDaniel.
Glad to be here.
Sundance DiGiovanni, the co-founder and CEO of MLG.
Thanks for having us.
And Tom Tsquared Taylor, professional Halo player.
How you doing, Leah? I brought you a present for having us here. And be careful, if you put these on, I will try to marry you.
Oh my God.
And it comes with the... Want to play?
Nice.
And it comes with the matching shirt, so you can wear it. I figure you can be your gaming, your gaming PJs, because I just roll over and I play Halo in my boxers, so you can now do that.
Nice, thank you. Basically, what we're going to be talking about today is something that we all really love and have a lot of passion for, and that's esports. So I want to just jump right into it and talk about the growth that we've seen in esports. Maybe not since its inception, which basically happened with multiplayer games, but maybe since the rise of MLG. So Sundance, can you explain how esports has grown in your eyes since 2002 when MLG started?
Well, I think one of the things that we knew going into this was that we were going to be a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of network gaming, people being able to play remotely. That was something that was going to catch up to what we were trying to accomplish. And when we first started the league, we were very console-focused. But on the PC side, the history of competitive gaming has always been about network connectivity, going back to Doom, Quake, and all kinds of great things. But what we've seen, what's happened is that one of the original tenets of the business, which has stayed true to form, is that the language of the game takes over. Just like if you watch football, American or European rules football, when you watch the game is speaking to you. If you can mute the volume of the television, you still understand what's happening because the actions that take place within the game on the field make sense. So for us, one of the big challenges was getting to a point where we could present these games as sport and so that they could be understood with commentary or without. And one of the things we've seen is that we've finally got a great stable of games where people are tuning in anticipation of these huge matchups because there's an established fan base which is engaged, and there's also new fans being pulled in every event basically. So the big transformation for us has been that we've gotten to a point where as a broadcast property we have a viable business from the media standpoint that every time out the engagement level increases globally. Our last event, 140 countries, 147, I think, to be precise, 22.5 million streams. That's a high level of engagement. We used the third most traffic on Akamai that weekend behind Netflix and PlayStation Network. So that's a lot of people on the internet engaging in this activity as a spectator.
So, Tom, you've been around MLG since it's first started. How have you seen it change from day one to today?
Yeah, it first started with us bringing our Xboxes and televisions into the event, and now we have Dr. Pepper, one of our sponsors, setting up 8 monitors and a full tournament setup inside of our hotel suite. So that just goes to show how big MLG has gotten within the last couple of years, and it's just been so great being a part of everything.
Just a little bit of color on that. I remember the first time I ever met Tom actually was online on AIM. He was talking about how great a player he was going to be, and he actually... the story, it's kind of legendary now, is you saved lunch money so that you could be like the 5th guy in a car to drive cross-country, guaranteeing that you were going to dominate at your first ever MLG event. And from that point on, you were a dominant player. But it's in the very beginning was guys had to believe in a greater vision. There was nothing really to point to in terms of any success stories. We knew it could work. And the great thing I think that we saw within the community back then, and it continues to be true today, is that they're as engaged and as passionate as everybody who works on the business side of it. And that vision is a shared vision. Like, Tom now has opportunities to travel around. He makes appearances, and, he lives a much different life. But he's committed, a lot of his time and effort in the last 7-8 years to getting to that level, just as a professional athlete or as an entertainer of any type would.
And then it has taken 7 or 8 years for you to get to that point, but StarCraft only came out a year ago, and now it's blown up to such, ridiculously high proportions. So talk about that and how, the growth of what you've seen with the growth of StarCraft 2.
Well, I think StarCraft 2 is one of those things where you've got, it's kind of the perfect storm. It's the right thing at the right time with the right history. The original StarCraft game was the dominant platform in Korean esports for an extended period of time. There are huge names over there still who play the original game. Blizzard took a long time to get this game right, and has also invested in esports and in competitive gaming. JP has been casting games for a long time, and I think you could probably speak to it better than even I can in terms of compared to the original StarCraft and even WoW. StarCraft 2 has been lightning in a bottle because it's an amazing thing where it's the only game I've ever seen where people who play watch more than they actually play.
Yeah.
Like we did a study of people online. Like if you play games, normally you play a lot, and then occasionally maybe you'll watch some streams or some video, but it's such a complex game. It's like chess with I think it was heard described as being a concert pianist and a master chess player. Like you've got to have all these things going on at the same time.
Yeah. So JP, talk about that. Like, I mean, you're a commentator for MLG. How come people love watching it so much instead of playing it?
I don't really know. I mean, I'm actually one of the people who probably watches more than I actually play, which probably not good to say that publicly, but it's really hard because I'll sit down and watch a stream or something, and it'll just be someone streaming ladder games, and 12 hours later I'll be probably need to go to sleep now, probably need to do something else, but I don't know what it is about the game that's so engaging. It might be kind of the fact that people watch professional level sports, football, basketball, because they can't do that, but they want to see someone that can. Mm-hmm. And that might be one of the main reasons why someone watches these higher level players, because they might be able to do something like that. But some of these higher level players really have things that a lot of other people won't ever have. A lot of that being time, but also some of that being just basic motor functions that are a lot that they've kind of trained and adapted to play specifically in StarCraft 2.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's another aspect. Like, how much time do you put into practicing every day?
About 12 hours, especially leading into the tournament. We have a huge LAN going on right now. The tournament's in Anaheim, and we're practicing in a place in Laguna Beach, and we're going to, right after this interview, I'm about to drive back down there and play till I can't play anymore. So probably go till about 4 in the morning, wake up, and repeat the process.
I mean, I think that is incredible that, people are spending so much time practicing and playing and watching all of these great, things. And I just want to know from you, maybe, Sundance, how do you think it's going to grow in the future?
Well, I think for us, in terms of the goal, the end game for this is that we're still in a growth mode, right, as a business. I mean, we're still operating pretty much as a startup, even though we've raised venture capital money. We've got a global audience. So I look at like the 8-year-olds who are out there who casually play these games. Like my son is 8. He was at the very first MLG event in Stroller. Now he wears his MLG T-shirt to camp and gets stopped by counselors because they're fans. He watches StarCraft. He plays StarCraft. He's a fan of Halo. He's not allowed to play it, but he's a fan of it. And all the 8-year-old kids out there, they don't know a world where there was no MLG. They've grown up in a universe where this has existed and this has been on this level. So as those kids, and as the kids who are 12 and the kids who are 16 right now mature, they bring us more and more into the mainstream. So for me, the big thing is watching that develop as a brand that's established, where to my son, when he sees the MLG logo, and this was by design, next to the NFL logo, he's like, those are two sports. And I prefer MLG. And not just because, I started, but he's a huge fan, So just seeing that happen, seeing these guys, whether it's the casters or the players become bigger personalities, it all reinforces the fact that there's a community of very passionate people who have taken it to task that this is going to happen in their lifetime. And so that's the big thing is watching that develop, watching that mature. And this has been a great year for us in terms of some of the milestones that have happened already.
So going back to your son, who's 8, and his first esports moment was probably in that stroller. What was your first esports moment?
Oh, man. It had to be something with Quake, probably like a QuakeCon. I think actually the first one was driving with my dad when I was probably 14 or 15 up to right outside of Dallas in Grapevine, Texas for QuakeCon. And that was when kind of during the reign of fatality of esports, and met him there. And I think he played against some European who I forgot, Zamus or something like that. And that's really where I was kind of like, I'm at some event watching two guys play Quake against each other, and I don't really want to be anywhere else. So ever since then, I've just been hooked on esports in general.
Yeah, I'm going to go around and get you guys too, but my first esports experience was MLG, and it was for World of Warcraft. I was a huge World of Warcraft fan, and I loved Fnatic Ors and Gravitas in 2008, and it got me so hooked, so I just kept watching it and kept following all the MLG games, and now I'm here and love StarCraft just as much. So what about you? What was your first esports experience?
My first one was the time that I carpooled up to Nashville, or to Dallas, actually, and met Sundance. And I slept in the middle section of a minivan. You know how there's 2 seats, and then there's 2. I laid in the middle part and got to see Sundance and got a free MLG T-shirt, and I think that was like the highlight of my life at the time. Yeah. And you know, competed, got 3rd place. It was awesome because my mom told me if I didn't make any money, because I was a teacher missing Friday and Monday to school, that I'd be done. So it was great slapping that check back on the table. And Sundance told me if I just keep doing what I'm doing, that I'm going to be a star. So ever since then, that was the rest was history, I guess you can say.
What about you, Sundance?
Well, I'm a little older than these guys, but I mean, my first job ever was when I was 16 years old. I finished high school early, and I moved out into a resort town, and I managed a video game arcade. And so I hustled pinball and I hustled fighting games in the arcade, but I wouldn't call that esports. I'd just call that being an opportunist. But in college, on the Sega Genesis, EA, NHL hockey, running a full season on graph paper with all my suite mates, playing with the worst team in the game, and for money and winning. That was probably the closest to esports. And then many years later, when Mike Sepso and I first started to work together, an office pool playing Tekken 2 and beating the crap out of him in that. So it was always around, but I think, just to me, it was always gaming, competitive, and community. Like, it was never a solo activity where I'm just alone. Or if I was, I was doing that until I was in a room with other people. So it's like I've just always played games competitively.
Do you think that that's why esports is just becoming so big? It's because something you can do with the community and do with your friends, and it's just like...
Definitely. It's extremely social. Sure. Video games are extremely social thing, and I think that everyone's competitive, so that's why we're seeing the rise of esports.
Yeah. I think it also has to do with the developers, too. I mean, to do something like we've done with Halo and now with StarCraft 2, you really have to have developers behind it, because at the end of the day, we can't go into the game and alter any of the basic mechanics of it. It relies on them to make a great game and also to keep updating it constantly if there's major flaws in it.
Yeah, I think, it's like the community aspect of it. The other great thing is, like, so just as my son, who's now 8, is a big fan of this stuff and watches it from home, a lot of the guys who are coming into positions of power at the studios, whether they're the game designers or studio heads, 8 years ago, they were more junior, and maybe they're fans of what's going on, but now they're in a position where they can work with us. So, I've seen it time and time again, studios like Epic, for example, embracing it and making changes to the game for us around Gears of War 3, the Halo stuff, working directly with Blizzard, working with Treyarch and Infinity Ward around the Call of Duty series. You can say that this is a super hardcore, portion of the audience, and maybe not as important as the broader piece of that pyramid, that diagram you always see about the core and then the rest, but they're the influencers. They're the outliers. These are the guys who, if they rave about it, everybody else goes to them for information. So to see the studios and the publishers and the marketers support this and really be thinking about it, like Riot's a great example of someone else. I've been waiting 8 years for that, honestly, and I think these guys have too, because we've literally had to work with games that had varying degrees of broken
It's a good point, because like the entry level for Star 2 is what the pro players play. It's not like World of Warcraft where there's 13, however many million people playing it, but it's a different segment of the game. It's the PvP side of the game. It's not like Quake, where the main thing of Quake was 1v1, but then they altered it and made the eSports mode, whatever that is, and then it kind of segmented the community. So with Star 2, you play the 1v1 ladder, and you're playing the same thing that these pros are to most of the, I guess, the bigger extent.
Just not as well.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So what makes a game a good esport? Like, is it having a spectator mode or having multiplayer, or I think
it's just the skill cap of the game, like how much you can actually do to influence what is happening is probably one of the bigger things. I
agree. I think the skill gap's the most important thing. Yeah. If there's a certain amount of time that you practice, you want to be able to show people how good you are.
Yeah. I think that it's a really difficult question to answer, because there's kind of I could give you a 25-minute answer around just on the technology side, and then on the audience side, and then on the customization side. But at the end of the day, what it really comes down to, and what we've seen again and again, is the game's got to have that skill gap where the top 5% are miles away from the other 95%, right? And I mean miles. And then within that 5%, there's visible segmentation. It's got to allow for some customization. It's got to have a rabid community hooked into it. Because again, at the end of the day, nobody's going to come to watch us play tic-tac-toe. It's just not exciting. It's not interesting, right? But if, with a Halo or a Call of Duty and a StarCraft, we've seen it again and again. People want to watch. They want it. Like you go on Justin TV right now. I'm sure people are streaming matches of all these games, right? That wasn't the case 3 years ago. 3 years ago, 8 years ago, people told me I was crazy. Nobody would want to watch this, but they have. We went from having this stuff be on television on USA and G4, and then to taking it online, because that's where these guys live. Right? That's the accessibility is there. So I think a game that can support that can give something back to the community, either as a participant or as a spectator, meaning like I play on the same maps, it's very familiar, I get it, or I can sit back and watch and just be like, oh my God, did you see what that guy did? That's incredible. Yeah. There are a lot of great moments. The history of our league is really around how the players have evolved the metagame of each of the individual titles, right? You talk about StarCraft 2 and you look at, Terran drops and just Zerg play and just this, great force fields with Protoss. Stuff I can't do any of it well, but I try, and I'm like, okay, that's terrible. Or watching these guys play Halo, where I'm like, I've played all of the Halo games and mimicked some of the things I do after watching these guys, right? And there's kind of famous setups and famous strategies that people that have adopted and taken across the years. And Black Ops and the Call of Duty franchise is the same thing. It's just newer to it. So having a history helps, and that's the great thing. Is like we're in this deep enough where we have a history as an organization. People know we're going to do the right thing. So when we do select in game, it's got enough going on. It's got a community. It's got some developer support, and it's got people who can play it at a really high level.
So do you have games that are coming out in the future that you already have your eye on, like the Halo Anniversary Edition or Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3? That kind of stuff. Yeah, so
we get approached by a lot of people to take a look at their games, and there are certain things. Gears of War 3 is one that I think we'll use and have a lot of success with, because Gears of War 2 was a challenge for us. The Halo franchise has now shifted from Bungie, so there's a bit of a question mark in terms of what we're going to see there. And a lot of people still prefer the original Halo. Honestly, that's what we play in the office still, is 2v2s, because it was kind of the purest version of the game in a weird way. Obviously, there's Han and Dota. There's League of Legends is something we're looking at. We're open. Like, we have to be open to what the audience wants, because unlike a traditional league where there's one core activity, we have multiple titles that we're trying to run because we're trying to embrace all of the different pockets of competitive gaming. It would be much easier just to say we're going to put all of our money into one game, but that's never been the vision. The vision has been for everybody to kind of realize that we succeed or fail together. So we've got to have a stable of solid games, because on the other side of it is to be able to go out and get partners and sponsors and marketers who are going to spend against this audience. You need a blend, right? I need a title on Xbox. I need a title on PlayStation. I need a PC title. And to the community members who don't understand that, or who think that one group is above another, that's the problem. We're all in this together. So the sooner that we kind of get around that, the better off we'll all be.
So I got to ask you, since you don't have why don't you have a fighting game on the circuit?
Have fun with that.
With Emma or the Evo coming up, I got to ask.
Well, the reason we don't currently have a fight, other than Mortal Kombat, which is going to be there, we're working with Warner Brothers on that. The big game is Street Fighter, right? And there were issues. The last guy who ran the company pissed them off. And that's one of the things that I've been trying to repair for years. And frankly, that community, that subset that I'm talking about, all of us needing to work together, doesn't want to work together sometimes. There's ill will in weird ways, and it's not something that can be repaired immediately, but we're still working on it. We're trying to get them to a place where they're comfortable with it. And the fact is that next year we have a much different season structure coming up where it could be done very cleanly. So I'm with you. And anybody who wants us to have a fighting game, it's not me. I've said this before. If you can get Capcom to give me that game, I'll run it. I'll find money. But it's a challenge, because they're afraid we're going to kill the grassroots scene. When all we really want to do is support it.
Well, that's another huge proponent of esports are the communities. I mean, each game has, your Team Liquid or your GotFrag, how you used to have GotFrag. I mean, explain how important those types of communities are in esports.
I mean, to me, they're the most important things. Without a community like a Team Liquid, specifically for StarCraft, we would go to an event and we'd finish the event and we'd all clap and say like, great event, guys. But they're watching and they're telling us, hey, you need this. You need this for the next event. This needs to be improved on, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but some of the suggestions are a little off base.
Yeah,
but
there's suggestions. Like we have a place to go to that without a biased opinion where it's not like, oh, great event, guys. We have someone where we have a place where we can go and actually find, like you said, the right opinions where there are actually things that we can improve on going to events. So, and also you gotta have to have someone that watches the stuff you stream. So that's why communities are good.
I mean, without community or a sense of community, none of this matters. Honestly, I think that people, when I get asked why start this business or what was the goal wasn't to go out and create a sport out of video games. The goal was to take something that I held very dear to my heart growing up and to get it to the place where I felt like it could be. Right, so that people like this could have careers and become personalities, and people could cover it, and we could all be sitting here talking to folks about something that we all value. It had to have some direction. I'm not saying that I'm taking credit for that in a singular sense, but that's about community, right? It's like when I was a kid, I played a lot of sports. So when you're on those teams, that's a community activity. You're working together, right? And then there are other fans of that sport, and then you watch professionals play that sport. So we realized we had an amazing opportunity to start to build something where you could play on the same field with the same equipment as the best in the world. It's like fantasy camp almost for anybody, and see how good you actually are, right? How good am I? And this is the place. And so I think the community is behind that. That's why they're so passionate. And that's why the vocal minority can be so rough sometimes, is because they're like, hey, you're getting this wrong. But if they love us or hate us, right? I don't want anything in between. Don't be indifferent. Because if you hate us enough to be paying attention. Exactly. You're paying attention. If you love us, keep us honest.
Yeah. Either way you care is probably the best way to say it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess a closing question for everyone is, if you could change one thing about the esports scene right now, what would you change? And whoever wants to jump at that one can.
Yeah, Tom,
I want to change a thing. I think it's all perfect. And going back onto the community, I think that the community has grown with Major League Gaming also. I mean, I started when I was 14 years old, and we used to have immature little fights on the forums and things like that. So it's great that now, as the league's growing, we're all growing also as people and are setting an example for the kids also.
We go, Sonny. I don't have an answer yet, so you go.
No, you don't. So I think the one thing that I look at and I want to change is not so much anything from the inside, but it's external. I think the external thing is we need to, and it's about kind of how we carry ourselves, right, as people. It's not so much about competitive gaming, but it's about as people who are passionate about this, understanding and recognizing that when we operate, even within our own little world, that trickles out. The view of this world is that it's a bunch of extremists. Right. And well, that's cool. And it's, it's underground. That's not what we all want. What we all want is we want this to be the size and the scale that it can be, and it will be. So we have to be ambassadors. We have to be evangelists. We have to, when we're out there in the wild talking to people who aren't familiar with it, you got to keep that in mind. So that's the only, that's the real thing for me that I'd love to see change. And I've seen changes over the years, but it's still the thing that every couple, every 2-3 months, we're like, okay, we gotta kind of address the crowd here. But that's it. Other than that, it's just I'm just excited to watch it all develop.
Cool. You have an answer yet, JP?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing that I actually thought was a good idea, and I guess we'll see if it is or not. I think some of these leagues really have to start working together. We have like DreamHack, we've got, and even outside of the StarCraft 2 world, scheduling events on the same weekend as each other just really doesn't help anyone. Because, for example, this weekend there's the GSL finals, there's MLG, and there's EVO. I know I can probably name 100 people that want to go to both EVO and MLG, and they're having to make that decision.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a somewhat. There doesn't need to be like a council or anything that decides this. It's just you got to talk with all the other communities and all the other tournaments to make sure that something like that doesn't happen. Because there's even more events later on in the year where it is happening as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something that.
So get on it, Sonny.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a Wild West out there right now.
Yeah,
like, there's so many tournaments going on every single weekend. If you look online, there's 100 different tournaments going on for every single game that we all know and love, and it would be great to have these big events every once in a while. I mean, it's awesome to have them all the time, but it would be great to have them all in maybe one big league rather than thousands of little leagues.
The other component to that too, though, is kind of this advent, and happened right around StarCraft 2 came out, was the advent of online streaming is so easily accessible now. anyone can go and stream a tournament at a LAN center as long as they have an XSplit or some software based off of a PC and a camera and a way to get the game feed, which is an XSplit or something like that. So it's really easy to throw up a stream. And with that, I mean, we've seen small tournaments, for example, the Total Biscuit ShoutCraft Invitational, which had a ton of people watching over the weekend, and all it's doing is some guy in his house with a microphone and a PC running a tournament like that. So with more of those probably popping up, and it's even going into other games too, because it used to be for Halo, MLG was one of the only things, but now there's other tournaments out there and other smaller productions, which a lot of people are watching as well.
Yeah, so it's getting big. It's getting bigger.
It is. I think that one of the challenges, though, around that is also oversaturation, and I think
for sure
we've seen it in the past when people have kind of come into the space and approached it without really truly understanding the space. The good news is that I look around and most of the people who I see now who are trying to get involved are trying to do it the right way. But inevitably, with any league, I mean, kind of one of my beliefs is that at the end of the day, there ends up being one true premier league that everybody looks at.
Right.
I think that can happen with partnerships. I think that I'm not saying that's going to be MLG, but I'm just saying in terms of a structure, there needs to be something which is accommodating and aware of that. There's a reason that professional sports, in America, Europe, and Asia operate on the schedules they operate on. And part of it is overlap. Part of it is also just the seasonality of it. And that's something that we haven't really had here. You've seen it in Korea, and I think you're going to see it here next year. That's a little foreshadowing.
Cool. I mean, well, with that, I just wanted to say thank you all for being here so much, and make sure that you check out Major League Gaming's Anaheim Pro Circuit event this weekend on G4TV.com.